Eventually, the others returned to camp. Margaret talked to everyone, trying to forestall the inevitable discontent and anger. She thought that if they could survive the next few days, everything would calm down. She was furious with Adam and Helen. Their actions jeopardized the entire plan. Now Tom is a problem. He sits a little away from the group, and only Bill seems to be able to get him to talk. Margaret announced that they needed to agree on some rules to ease the tension caused by the implementation of consolation. She continued, "The wives said that at home they have sex once or twice a week, so they have enough time to console their lovers without compromising their husband's routine. So we get 2 days, and they get 5? Bill shouted. "No, we were thinking about a couple of days with each partner and breaks between them for the sake of rest." Kelly laughed. "Yes, we may need a few days of rest." None of the guys laughed, and Kelly continued, "Come on, if it's unpleasant for all of us, then what's the point? We should just have fun and not worry about it. In the real world, we wouldn't do this, but here it's just release, not love or a relationship. Husbands should not be neglected or embarrassed," Margaret said, looking straight at Helen and Adam. "This is absolutely normal. I have never refused my husband. Tonight will be spent with the husbands to reconnect and let the lovers try to find some food for a change. We definitely need it. The couples themselves will agree, and if they don't agree on something, I will be the arbiter." Tom tried his best not to, but he couldn't stop himself from having sex with Helen. The sensations were completely different, as if you were sleeping with a stranger. The sex was rough. It was definitely just sex, and not lovemaking. The sights of Helen with Adam and her words tormented him. He was completely at a loss, and Helen felt it. "You know that I'm yours, don't you?" "I don't like him." "You have never felt less than mine, Helen." "I am yours forever. Please don't doubt it. How do you want to organize our time together? You just can't wait. Do what you want. I will often go hunting." "Don't be like that. We have to deal with this. You're still my priority." Helen dropped the subject, hoping that Tom would calm down, and wishing she had followed Mary's example and been more delicate. When she woke up the next day, Tom was gone. She thought he would calm down soon, although the lack of communication with her husband the previous night had worried her. Tom stayed away from the camp. Without the food he supplied, the others began to starve. Eventually, Bill tracked him down and discovered that Tom had built himself a mini-camp. Bill explained the situation. They fished and hunted together. Bill tried to learn and brought food to the camp. While Bill was tracking Tom, Mary was walking along the beach with Dan. "How are things with Bill?" "I think he's coping. I understand that you are not doing this of your own free will, but I want you to like it." "We shouldn't do anything you don't like." Mary smiled at Dan. "You simply charm." She turned and kissed him. It was a hot, sultry kiss, fully exploring each other. His reaction was quite obvious, and Mary felt a sudden excitement before leading him back to the shelter. If Dan expected to see a timid and shy wife, he was mistaken. Mary unbuttoned her blouse, revealing her large breasts. "I saw how you looked at them. Would you like to take a closer look at them?" Mary decided that if she was going to do this, then she shouldn't hold back. Sexually, she was like possessed. "Wow, you are the sexiest woman I have ever known." "This is amazing. I don't know how to thank you." Mary caressed his face. "I think I should be thanking you." Tom turned to Bill. "How do you deal with it, seeing Mary with another guy?" Bill shrugged. "I just try not to pay attention to it. It's easier to cope if you just forget about what could be happening between them. And I can't seem to cope with this at all. Mary makes it easier than Helen. She at least seems reserved and constantly checks on how I'm doing. And our time together seems to be the same." Tom's time away from the group allowed him to explore the island. He made the difficult climb to the highest point and was able to make out another distant island, as well as a spot on the horizon that might just be another island. This made him wonder if their island was part of the archipelago chain. While checking out another cove for potential fishing spots, he saw this. An old dugout canoe made from a tree trunk was washed up on the high tide line. He pulled it out and examined it. It was almost intact, but sat low in the water. Over the next few days, he managed to repair it and make a crude oar. He sailed it towards the main camp, thinking it was surprisingly durable. The others were surprised to see it and rejoiced, thinking that the canoe would improve their chances of catching more fish. Tom and Bill set to work to make better oars, using oars from an old shipwreck. Having finished their work, they tried to fish, each time going further and further. For added stability, they added external floats and practiced stowing water, food, and spare oars by attaching them to the canoe with string made from leaves. Even though Tom returned to the main camp, he continued to ignore Helen. 3 weeks have passed since preparations began to consolidate the guys. Helen tried to talk to Tom again. "I miss you very much, Tom. Please stay with me in the camp. I only gave it to Adam for 2 nights, even though you weren't here. And what do you want? A medal. Others accepted it. Why can't you? You know that Kelly, Michael, and Steve feel comfortable together, constantly sharing shelter. And Bill has adjusted to Mary looking after Dan. Can't you find a way?" "No, I can't. But you got your wish." "It wasn't my desire. I'm so lonely without you, Adam, to be honest. He's a bit of an asshole. Please take me back. Sorry, I really liked him and got carried away. I didn't mean to seem so impatient or to neglect you. I just wanted to get it over with." "Stop it, Helen. You were more than enthusiastic and were hardly in a hurry to end this." "Okay. I meant that I wanted to figure everything out and work it out. I still want us to be together. I hate the idea that you are all alone. Please let me keep an eye on you. The whole idea was to avoid any conflict. You got what you wanted and you barely thought about me. You treated me like crap. Actually, you shouldn't do that to someone you claim to love. But I love you. I thought you could handle it. You are stronger than any of us. You know, I think that, at least in this, you are right." Tom explained his idea to Bill and Margaret. He would use a canoe to try to get to the next island, and from there, see if there was a second one. If this is an archipelago, then there may be more islands and he will be able to jump from one to another, perhaps crossing sea routes and having a chance of salvation. They both thought he was crazy, but he and Bill set to work preparing. News of his plan quickly became common knowledge. Helen approached Tom as he loaded a barrel of water onto the canoe. "Please tell me it's not because of what I did." Tears were streaming down her face. "This is suicide. Don't go. I'll break up with Adam. I have to try. This place is driving me crazy, and not just me." Tom himself was surprised at how little he now valued Helen's opinion. Once upon a time, he would have done everything not to upset her, but not now. Tom asked Bill to stay and look after their wives. "I suppose they have other men willing to do it." "Maybe, but you and Mary still have something going on, and this one-person thing has less impact. I have a better chance alone. The supplies will last longer." Bill couldn't argue with that logic, but he also understood that his friend was simply protecting him. This attempt was almost suicide. The farewell was emotional. Everyone came, even Adam, although he kept his distance. They hugged him and wished him luck. Tom was even able to hug a sobbing Helen. As he watched Tom slowly disappear, Adam thought it was a win-win. Either they would be rescued or he would have Helen forever, and he was looking forward to their first night together. That thought quickly dissipated as he approached her. "Fuck off. We might as well kill him. He is a better man than you will ever be, and I threw him away." Margaret overheard the comment and thought the assessment was pretty accurate. She regretted her involvement in this whole sad story and the loss of her best hunter and breadwinner. It was incredibly difficult to row, especially with the currents and winds pushing him off course to the east. He was glad that he had done so many training swims and built up some muscle. At times he saw shark fins and quickly pulled out baited hooks. It took Tom 2 days to reach the island, which he saw from the top of the mountain. He waited out the weather, found some fresh water, and tried to use the high ground to determine his destination, and was disheartened. There was absolutely nothing in sight. Perhaps the second island was just a cloud. He could turn back, a smart decision. He had almost enough supplies, or he could sail on. Thoughts about the survivors on the old plane helped him make the decision to sail on. He decided to sail east again, hoping that any archipelago should continue in roughly the same direction. if there were other islands there. After 3 days of paddling, with very little sleep and dizziness from dehydration, he spotted another island and landed near a deep crevice in the jungle canopy, in hopes of finding fresh water. The landing was difficult due to the reef surf, but he managed and, to his delight, found a freshwater stream from which he drank greedily. When he woke up next to the stream, he did not know whether he lost consciousness or simply fell asleep. He rested and drank often, terribly pleased that he could urinate again. Slightly refreshed, but left with almost no food. He again had to make the same decision: head further east and hope for the best, or return. But he didn't think that he would have enough food to return, and he set off again, quickly losing track of the hours and then the days. The food had long since run out and the water dried up on the 4th day. The sea seemed endless. Water. Water everywhere and not a drop to drink. The lines from Coleridge's poem have never been more appropriate. From fatigue, he could no longer row and let the canoe drift. In a brief glimmer of consciousness, he vaguely thought that everything was hopeless, but at least he had made a good attempt. Then, on the 5th day, he saw it. The boat. Remembered the mirror in his backpack, was able to pull it out and used it to reflect the sunlight and try to signal the ship. Not a boat, but a ship. And he approached. He laughed internally. Fuck you, Adam. The mirror worked after all. Tom remembered almost nothing of what happened next, only some memories of the ship and mentions of others. He was taken off the ship by a military helicopter and taken to hospital, by which time he was hallucinating and severely dehydrated. Despite this, he did a good job of describing the islands and where the others were. The next few weeks were a succession of hospitals, procedures, and questions from authorities and insurance companies. Tom had an emotional reunion with Helen, and then with the entire group. They thanked him repeatedly for allowing them to survive. Margaret told Tom that just before the rescue, the group had agreed that the conditions of comfort did not need to be mentioned or communicated to anyone else. Bill did not forget to pick up the old ship's log and gave it to Tom as a keepsake, and in gratitude for the fact that his old friend saved him. There was a media storm surrounding their story. Suddenly there were requests for all kinds of television interviews, magazine articles, and press publications. Tom and Bill tried to avoid this. The rest of the group, including their wives, were not so restrained. One of the book publishers already had ghostwriters working on the book and film adaptation, and a whole support team began giving interviews and writing series about their time on the island. Tom and Bill began to resent the content of some. In some memoirs, the authors took credit for what they did not do. Because Tom and Bill provided little information, it was easier for the publishers to portray Adam as the heroic leader who saved the group. Tom and Bill sat together reflecting on their marriages. Bill stated that Mary repeatedly apologized for going to the island with Dan and asked if they could leave everything there, saying that the circumstances were so difficult that it had nothing to do with their normal life together. Bill tried his best to do just that. No doubt she tried her best to shield him from her actions, and he hoped they would return to normal. Tom nodded, saying that Helen says about the same thing, but they are still distant from each other. There is an emotional emptiness, and they hardly talk. Helen tried to reconcile with Tom again, saying that he should be allowed to be celebrated as the hero who saved them all, rather than sit in the shadows in the background. I'd rather focus on saving our marriage, but you seem more concerned about this whole media circus. We can make a lot of money from this circus, and I want to be proud of my husband for saving us, and for us to be together as a couple, like everyone else. I haven't done anything to be ashamed of, and I don't understand why I'm an outcast. At least I was honest about my desires. Not like Mary. What about Mary? Nothing. What exactly? Well, she was hardly innocent. Long before they agreed on consolation, she and Margaret were satisfying the guys. That's where it all started. And yet, she came out of it like a saint, her marriage intact. Tom was shocked and faced a dilemma. Should he tell Bill? Helen may have lied or exaggerated to make herself look better. The book's release was approaching. Even Tom could not avoid the event that would mark the signing of the film agreement. The TV special to support the book was to include interviews with them all. Tom and Bill were dressed in suits that they could not get used to. Their wives, however, looked absolutely stunning. Elegant evening dresses emphasized the weight she had lost and the deep natural tan she had acquired while on the island. Helen hugged Mary as soon as they saw each other. They immediately talked about the state of their marriages. At the far end of the room, they saw Adam, Dan, Greg, and Steve. Zach was still in the long-term rehabilitation unit. God, just look at them. They look like a walking dream, all washed and cleaned. Do you miss Dan? Well, I mean, the sex? Mary stopped and looked around before whispering, honestly, yes, he was young, energetic, and handsome. And the sex was honestly a revelation, so yes, I really miss him. But all is still not well with Bill. Helen replied, we are far beyond smooth. Tom is definitely cold. I can't get through to him. Give him time, it's hard for them to come to terms with this. We can no longer pretend to be faithful wives, and we didn't really try to. Honestly, Mary, I think we're done. And if that's the case, then I'm wondering if I should give Adam one more try. The ensuing storm was started by Bill after he saw another video clip of Adam saying that he was the one who provided the most of the food for the group. He loudly proclaimed, "What nonsense!" Everything that Adam just described was done by Tom. Publishers hastened to intervene and tried to hush up this outbreak, saying that memories are different and that everyone has their own point of view. Bill was escorted out, but Adam was furious that he had been exposed. By the time Tom calmed Bill down and they returned to the main room, Adam and Dan were talking to Helen and Mary. Tom approached the small group. And what do we have here? We're just getting to know your wives again. That's right. Maybe we should meet you outside. Come on, Tom, don't do that. We know each other intimately after all. Anyway, we were just asking if Helen and Mary were going to a party at the publisher's apartment. I'm guessing you guys won't want to come because you only contributed so little to the writing of the show, even though it made us all a ton of money. Tom turned to Helen. And do you want to go? Helen shrugged without answering. Go to a party or go with this asshole? Well, we haven't had sex since we got back. Unless, of course, you want to take me back to your bed as your wife. I will be glad if you do this. You're making the same choice again, Helen, only this time there's no excuse for survival. Adam intervened. Come on, Tom. This is nothing new. We had sex hundreds of times on the island, and I remember that Helen always enjoyed it. Mary became alarmed. She pulled Bill aside and said quietly, Don't mind Helen. She's trying to make Tom jealous so he'll take her back. It's just a party. And you want to go to it? Yes, it is not of great importance, but it is part of the media requirements. However, given your previous outburst of emotions, it would be better if you did not go. I understand then. Bye. He looked at her, hoping that she would not go. If Mary hadn't been looking at Dan, she might have noticed Bill's gaze or realized that he said, bye, instead of the usual good evening. Anyway, she turned and left with the others. Adam looked back at Tom and grinned as they walked away. He had a clear intention of having sex with Helen, and Tom again couldn't do anything about it. He was almost sure that Dan would also make another attempt to get Mary. Tom and Bill reluctantly trudged toward the bar, defeated, their last hopes of their wives' return quickly fading. They sat in silence for several minutes, but it seemed like hours. Well, how did we agree? Bill answered with a long sigh. Yes, I agree. The next day, Helen and Mary immediately rushed to the official promotional event, a series of blitz date-style interviews with various members of the press. Mary was still reproaching herself for falling asleep exhausted after talking with Dan. However, she was able to convince Bill that everything was innocent, and after a late finish, the publishers placed them in different numbers. Helen and Mary's first interview on national television began with an introduction and a few warm-up questions. So, Mary, what is the secret of your survival? Well, I would say that in difficult times, we worked together, looked out for each other. That was our guiding principle. Helen, weren't there any areas of conflict? There must have been some tension where survival was at stake. There were some things, but we overcame them by focusing on what was important. How are things going after you return home? To be honest, it's difficult to adapt. I think we are still recovering from what happened to us. There was news in this morning's papers that you actually cared about some guys more than others. What? What do you have in mind? Your husbands have just published excerpts from their own memoirs about the island, which indicate that the women on the island were quite accommodating. What? Volume? He could not. Do you know who the father of Kelly's child is? What? Oh God. Kelly is pregnant? How are Adam and Dan doing, Mary? We understand you were with them last night. At this point, bedlam began. Mary ran away, sobbing, while more and more press gathered to ask questions. The publishers tried their best to save both women. Bill, reluctantly agreeing with Tom, said, "I never thought Mary would leave with them again. Thanks for telling me about what she did on the island." Margaret also admitted the truth when I cornered her. This gave them the go-ahead to move forward. The old ship's log, which Tom kept, described in detail all the events on the island. Upon returning home, he gave it to a friend who worked for a Sunday newspaper. His friend worked with Tom and Bill to draft articles and write a major series. The newspaper was eager to publish the article, especially since it completely undermined the official version of the large publishing house, but they needed confirmation from Tom or Bill. They were worried Tom would pull out, but agreed that holding her back would make the story even bigger. They will be able to take advantage of the official launch advertisement, using it to boost sales with a juicy sensation. Serial publications and short inserts can cost a fortune. Tom held back, worried about Mary and Bill, but everything changed. Mary's decision to go to the party sealed their fates. The true story was revealed as soon as possible. The press speculated about what had happened, and it began to be called Love Island. The wives were ashamed. When Helen and Mary read the newspapers, they cried, "My God, this is worse than I thought. This makes us look like complete sluts." Adam, Dan, and Steve fared no better. By seducing the wife of the guy who saved your life and taking credit for his achievements, they were disgraced and ostracized. Finally, Tom and Bill agreed to meet with their wives on the condition that they signed the divorce papers that the lawyers were working on. Why did you do this to us, Tom? What? Did you tell the truth? You said you had nothing to be ashamed of, and you didn't do anything wrong. So I shared that sentiment, just like you announced your little vote on the island. Lord Tom, you ruined us, me, Mary, and everyone else. I think I gave you about as much attention as you gave me on this fucking island. I have no sympathy for any of the women or guys who had fun with you while living off our hard work. The only people I cared about were Bill and Mike, and they were okay with it. Mike? What does he have to do with all this? It turns out that Kelly was planning to run away with Steve if he turned out to be the father of her child. You all deserve each other. I had no idea that we offended you so much. More likely you didn't care. But in any case, I must thank you. For what? You gave me the incentive to go and save myself. Otherwise, we would all still be there. Some of us may have had more fun than others. Mary interrupted him, turning to Bill. I was trying to be careful and protect you, Bill. It was about survival. Do we have any chance? No. You were doing this just like Helen, but behind my back. She was at least honest about this. And that night at the party after the interview showed your true nature. Don't bother denying it. Mary lowered her eyes, blushing. I do not like him. I believe not. But if you don't love me, that's even worse. It means you left us for simple sex. I hope it was worth it. Mary began to sob. Of course, he wasn't worth it. I became greedy and stupid. I want us to live together so we can do everything we planned. I beg you, take me back, Bill. I'll do whatever you want. I want the wife I had before that trip, but you can't offer that anymore. She's gone. So now I want you to leave me alone forever. This comment caused Mary to cry hysterically. Helen was made of sterner stuff. She refused to cry, but she also couldn't keep her head held high. Tom ended the meeting. Goodbye, Helen, and please, don't stay in touch. For the survivors, money became an issue. The official book had to be withdrawn as it was extremely discredited, and all proposals were withdrawn. Publishers have also filed damage claims to recoup their costs. Accident insurance payments helped them stay afloat. Tom and Bill had no such problems, as their memoirs became bestsellers. They have put off negotiating further deals until their divorces are settled. Reputation is another matter. The spouses were shunned in their hometown. Mary's conservative family completely disowned her. She moved out, but was hounded by the press every step of the way. Helen tried to bluff by telling the press that she had done nothing wrong. We survived. Without these actions, we would have quarreled and worked against each other. People shouldn't make comments until they find themselves in a live or die situation. Her answer even won her a few supporters. She was notorious and a popular target for young ladies' men. Although no one would risk having the real relationship with her that she craved, she simply couldn't be trusted. Tom and Bill remained best friends and continued their travels. Wealth made life easier, and adventures became more and more, because now neither of them needed to work. In addition, during their travels they met women. Neither of them was in a hurry to settle down, and both were a little shy, but were full of optimism that this would happen in due time. But for now, it was a lot of fun to practice. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.